Field of 12 After Dark Draft Special, quarterbacks with quarterbacks. Fellas, let's go to Ohio State now. CJ Stroud took the program over after Justin Fields got rolling, goes in the first round. He has extended Ohio State's succession of quarterbacks now in the draft. Where does he sit? Hack said he's 1B in this draft. Clint, Trevor, how do you see that? Is that basically a foregone conclusion, or is there some argument otherwise? Clint, I'll go with you first.
Yeah, for me, it depends on kind of how the quarterback needy teams fall. If Houston trades out of 2, I'm assuming they're going to do it for a quarterback needy team. Then I think CJ Stroud is the bait that draws the trade. When I look at CJ Stroud, I personally believe he's number 2 in this draft, unless we plug in a couple of different scenarios with certain teams, and I think Anthony Richardson could get into the mix. But right now, CJ Stroud is that guy. Look, I think 10 years ago, if CJ Stroud came out 10 years ago, he'd be undisputed number 1, no doubt about it. You're talking about ideal build, prototypical, if you will. I hate that word, but the prototypical pocket passing quarterback that has the film to back up anything you want in terms of throwing the route tree, the NFL route tree to the wide side of the damn field if you want to. So, I like Stroud at number 2. I think Stroud's got a chance to be, if teams start passing on him, for instance, if Carolina goes Bryce and Houston trades out, you're going to have 2, if not more teams that are going to pass on CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud this year has the potential to be the biggest regret, if you will, of the draft. Teams looking back and going, damn it, man, what did we not, why did we not think that guy was more of the Georgia film instead of what we watched in the Big Ten all year long? I mean, if he's more of what we saw versus Georgia than he was the first however many games he started at Ohio State, if he really is the semifinal Ohio State Georgia CJ Stroud, good God, he's gonna absolutely crush the league, man. So
TK, you're right, Clint. I love my bad jumping on that. If teams do look at him through that lens of the Georgia game that Clint's talking about, does he have any shot of hearing his name called first in this draft?
Well, based on what we all just discussed, including my stance, I think no. Is that fair to say? It's not, because CJ Stroud is fantastic. And you look at last year's draft, I know we talked a little bit about this offline, but you look at any other draft, CJ, outside of having Bryce Young and maybe a couple others, like you mentioned, Trevor Lawrence, CJ is going number 1 overall. He processes well. He gets the ball out. He's a leader. I think some of the knocks on him are, man, he just had so much talent around him. Is it them or is it him? But you flip on the tape and you really start to analyze it. You're like, no, it was him. They made great plays. Don't get me wrong, but he made all the throws. He put it on the money in tight windows. To me, CJ Stroud has the better chance of having a long-term career in the NFL than even a Bryce Young, in my opinion. And you ask me why, I could go in a million different directions. I just have this feeling that, man, he's going to get in a good situation. You know, he's going to help build a team up. They're going to be like, man, this is our guy for the long term, where he's going to sign to a big deal. It's going to keep him in one spot for a while. If that's Houston, great for Houston. And he's just going to get better and better and better. And next thing you know, he's going to be 10 years, 15 years into his NFL career, and he's just going to continue to get better and better and better. He's a safe pick anywhere you pick him. I think he's going to go number 2 to the Texans. I think they would be crazy if they didn't take him there.
Hack, let's just go right off of what TK is saying. I want your thoughts on CJ Stroud. I know you've been heavily invested in Big Ten players and teams. But first, I want to ask you, where could he get 15 years in the NFL? Which situation? Is that Houston? Is it Indianapolis? Is it the Raiders? If you could just pick him up and just set him into an organization saying, here you go. I'll see you in 2038. What would that scenario be in your opinion?
It's a tough. There's so many variables that go into that, George. So I'm dodging your question. I'll just be point blank about it. I'm going to dodge that question. There's so many variables that go into it. What I think, going back to what I was saying about Bryce and why I have them both at 1A and 1B, and the only reason that I gave Bryce the A is, had CJ beaten Georgia, had CJ won a Big Ten championship, we always talked about CJ playing really well in games that ultimately he never won. The Oregon game, his freshman year, he throws for 400 yards and they lose, right? Yeah. So, like, he never has had that moment where it was like completely 100% CJ Stroud won that football game. Had the kicker made the kick against Georgia, to Clint's point, you're sitting there going, that kid completely won that football game by himself, threw the whole team on his back. Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't give a shit who's out there, threw him on his back and said, we're going to win this football game. He just never had that in his career. And I think that subliminally is, when you think about CJ Stroud and you put him up side by side with Bryce Young, he just never had that moment, right? But I think talent-wise, insertion, put him in, let him play, I think he can process the same way. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he learned from Ryan Day, who I have a ton of respect for, been a guy in NFL. He can process too. It may not be as blatantly obvious or talked about as Bryce Young, but I think CJ processes just fine. And I think he's a guy who you can plug and play, right? But ultimately, I think that when you get put in a room with alphas, there's going to be some questions about what happened in that Georgia game. I know you did everything you could. What happened in the Big Ten championship games 2 years in a row? You know, you played well in both of them, but it never really panned out your way. Can you get a group of men to follow you and ultimately come over that cusp of that, like, intangible conversation? That's why I said, when I talk about these two guys, it's not, can they play different body types? Who gives a shit, right? Like, I just want a guy who's going to come in and be a difference maker in my organization. I think both these guys have the potential to be that. I think CJ is going to need a little bit of help and confidence from that. I don't know. Maybe he has it, right? I haven't had the chance to sit down and talk with the kid and be around him and watch how he operates and watch how he interacts. But ultimately, that's why I said I'm not getting paid to make that decision. But if I was, that's how I would look at it. And that's what I'd be grilling him on. And I do think he has a chance to go to Carolina at number one, right? I think that there is a conversation. I think there's a scenario. But ultimately, you know, again, I'm not going to make that. I'm not pulling the trigger on that.
The thing I love about both of these two, you've never heard anything but football about either one of them. They're both mature. They're both about ball. They're about their business. Teammates love them both. Both played at high pressure situations.